The county clerk had a small desk fan running even though it was March, and the sound of it was the loudest thing in the room when she turned her monitor toward me. 2 filings. Same parcel number. Same legal description. My mother's name on the first one, dated 3 weeks prior. My name on the second one, dated that morning. The clerk looked at the screen. She looked at me. She said she would need to flag this for the assessor's office and that someone would be in touch, and her voice had the particular flatness of a person delivering information they have delivered before and expect to deliver again. I had the soil survey binder in the bag, over my shoulder. I had brought everything I had. Welcome back to Channel, where the ground remembers who worked it, even when the paperwork tries to forget. The parcel had been in our family since 1961, when my grandfather paid $8,400 for 43 acres of second-growth timber on the south slope of a ridge in Clallam County, 12 miles inland from Port Angeles on a gravel road that turned to mud every November and stayed that way until April. He had logged it twice in his lifetime, selectively, the way people did then when they intended to keep the land, and by the time my grandmother died and the parcel passed to my mother, the canopy had grown back enough that the aerial photos showed solid green. My mother had grown up driving that gravel road. She had opinions about the land the way people have opinions about places that shaped them, strongly held, loosely examined. She believed the timber was worth more than any forester had ever told her. She believed the east boundary was where her father had always said it was, despite evidence to the contrary that had been accumulating since 1994. She believed that her name on the deed, inherited from her mother, was the same thing as understanding what the parcel actually contained and required. I was 31 when I started going out there seriously. Before that, I had gone the way anyone goes to family land for the occasional weekend, to walk the ridge trail my grandfather had cut, to check that the gate at the road was locked and the no trespassing signs were still on the fence posts. My mother went perhaps twice a year. The land existed in our family the way heirlooms exist. Present, significant, requiring occasional dusting, not really examined. What changed it, for me, was a letter. In the spring of my 31st year, the Washington Department of Natural Resources sent a notice to the parcel's address of record, my mother's house in Sequim, 20 minutes west, informing her that the timber on the property had been flagged in a routine aerial survey as potentially meeting the threshold for a forest practices notification. The letter said nothing alarming. It said only that if she intended to conduct any harvest activity in the next calendar year, she would need to file a notification with the DNR under the Forest Practices Act, and that the agency was available to assist with questions. My mother forwarded the letter to me by taking a photo of it on her phone and texting it. The photo was slightly blurry. Her accompanying message said, "Can you look into this?" I looked into it. I called the DNR regional office in Forks and spoke to a forestry technician named Walt who explained the notification process and mentioned, in passing, that the parcel had also come up in a recent riparian mapping update, which might be relevant depending on where the seasonal creek ran relative to the timber boundary. Asked him what a riparian mapping update was. He explained. Asked if there was a way to get the current mapping data for the parcel. He said he could email it. That was the beginning. I drove out to the parcel the following Saturday morning. I parked at the gate, unlocked it with the combination my mother had given me years ago, and walked in on the old skid road my grandfather had used for the second harvest. The road was overgrown but still traceable, the ground compacted enough beneath the fern and oxalis that you could feel where it was by the way your boots landed. I walked the full length of it, about half a mile, to where it ended at the upper landing, and then I stood there in the quiet under the second-growth fir, and looked at what 43 acres of neglected timber actually looked like from the inside. It looked like work. The understory was dense with vine maple that had come in after the last selective harvest and never been managed. There were standing dead trees, snags, in the southwest corner that were a fire risk in a dry summer and a liability question in any summer. The seasonal creek Walt had mentioned ran closer to the timber boundary than my mother's mental map had it, which meant the riparian buffer requirement would affect any future harvest planning. The east boundary, the one my grandfather had always described as running along the top of the basalt outcrop, was marked by a fence line that had been maintained inconsistently and in at least 2 places appeared to have drifted. I walked back to my truck and sat in it for a while with the DNR mapping printout Walt had emailed me, which I had printed at the library in Port Angeles before driving out. I looked at the creek line on the map. I looked at the east boundary notation. Then I drove back to Port Angeles and bought a field notebook at the hardware store, the kind with the waterproof cover, orange, that surveyors use, and I started writing things down. The first cruelty beat arrived the way the first ones usually do, dressed as something else entirely. It was Memorial Day weekend of that same year, which meant the family gathering at my Aunt Philippa's house in Sequim, which meant the back patio with the string lights, the same folding tables that came out every year, the potato salad my cousin Ren made that everyone was polite about. My mother's brother Garrett was there with his wife, and Philippa's daughter home from college, and various neighbors who drifted in and out the way neighbors do at that kind of gathering. The conversation found the land the way it always did. Someone asked my mother about it because someone always asked because it was the most interesting thing in the family's inventory. 43 acres of timber up on the ridge, my mother said. She had her iced tea in both hands, the easy posture of a woman in a familiar story. My father bought it in '61. It's just been sitting there appreciating. Garrett asked if she'd ever thought about logging it. I've been looking into it, she said. It's a process. The state has all these requirements now. I was standing at the drinks table refilling my glass. I had spent 11 Saturdays on that parcel by then. I had completed the first phase of the soil survey. I had a meeting scheduled with Walt at the DNR for the following Thursday. Dessa's been helping her look into it, my Aunt Philippa said, with a mild helpfulness of someone contributing accurate information. She's been out there a few times, my mother said. Her voice was pleasant. She was looking at Garrett, not me. It's good to have someone check on it. A few times. 11 Saturdays. The orange field notebook already half full. I filled my glass and walked back to the table and sat down and passed the bread basket to Garrett's wife, and I let it sit. Family. The soil survey binder was the first document that made the work legible in a form someone else could hold. I had started it because Walt at the DNR suggested it, not in those words, but in the practical way of someone who deals with landowners regularly and has learned that the ones who come in with documentation get further than the ones who come in with opinions. If you're thinking about any future management activity, he had said at our Thursday meeting, sitting across from me in the DNR regional office with a topographic printout between us, it helps to have a current soil assessment on file, especially with the riparian question. I found a soil scientist through the Washington State University Extension Office in Port Angeles, a woman named Dr. Kay Lindstrom, who did private parcel assessments on contract. Her rate was $185 per hour, and the full assessment for a parcel of our size would take 2 field days plus report preparation. Total estimated cost, $2,960. I called my mother. What do we need that for? She said. I explained what Walt had said. I explained the riparian question. I explained that if she ever wanted to harvest any timber or apply for any management programs, having a current soil assessment would be required documentation. Well, I don't know that I want to spend $3,000 right now, she said. Can't you just figure it out yourself? I had a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and 4 years of work experience at a land trust in Port Townsend. I was not a licensed soil scientist. I'll pay for half, I said. She said that was generous. She said she appreciated it. She said to go ahead and schedule it. Signal 3, dollar amounts logged. $8,400, grandfather's purchase, 1961, $185 per hour, Dr. Lindstrom, $2,960, assessment total, Dessa pays $1,480. I scheduled it. Dr. Lindstrom came out on 2 Fridays in July, and I met her at the gate both mornings at 7:30 and walked every transect with her, carrying the sample bags and the equipment case and the datasheet clipboard while she worked. I learned more about the soil profile of that 43 acres in 2 Fridays than my family had learned in 60 years of ownership. The assessment report, when it came in August, was 41 pages. I read all of it. I put it in a 3-ring binder, dark green cover, the kind with a clear front pocket, and printed a label for the spine. Halcyon Ridge Parcel, Soil Survey, Dr. K. Lindstrom, Clallam, Thai WA. I brought it to my mother's house in Sequim and set it on her kitchen table. She picked it up, turned it over, and set it back down. That's thorough, she said. Page 18 has the riparian buffer analysis, I said. That's the one Walt will want to see. I'll look at it, she said. I did not ask if she did. I kept a copy for myself in the file cabinet in my home office in Port Angeles. When Walt's office requested documentation the following spring, I sent them the copy directly. 7 is a number that appears often in the accounting of unpaid work. 7 seasons. 7 years. 7 of anything feels like enough time that someone should have noticed, and yet the noticing always seems to land in the 8th year, or the 9th, after the shape of the arrangement has calcified into something that feels like simply the way things are. I had been working the parcel for 5 seasons when I understood that the shape of our arrangement had calcified. Let me try to describe what 5 seasons of parcel work looks like from the inside. It looks like driving the gravel road in the dark in November because the gate padlock had been cut, not by anyone with obvious intent, just cut, the way things go wrong in rural counties, and getting there before anyone could come back for whatever they had been planning. It looks like replacing the padlock with a better one I bought at the hardware store for $34. It looks like the DNR Forest Practices notification I filed in year 2, which required completing a 4-page form, submitting a scaled site map I drafted myself using the topographic data from Walt's office, and attending a site visit with a DNR inspector named Hector, who spent 2 hours walking the parcel with me and asked questions my mother would not have been able to answer. It looks like Hector shaking my hand at the gate afterward and saying the documentation was the best prepared he'd seen from a private landowner all year. It looks like the erosion control project in year 3, the area on the southwest slope where the skid road had channeled runoff and carved a gully 18 inches deep and 20 feet long. I found a conservation district cost share program through the Clallam Conservation District that would reimburse 60% of approved erosion control work. The application required a site assessment, a project plan, and 3 contractor bids. I did the site assessment myself, wrote the project plan from a template the Conservation District provided, and got the bids from 2 fencing contractors and a restoration contractor in Sequim. The approved project cost $6,740. The Conservation District reimbursed $4,044. My mother paid the remaining $2,696 after I sent her the invoices, with the reimbursement calculation already done. She said the gully looked much better. She said it when she came out to see the finished work, which was the first time she had been to the parcel in 14 months. Signal 3. Dollar amounts logged. New $34. Padlock. $6,740. Erosion project. $4,044. Conservation district reimbursement. $2,696. Mother's net cost. Signal 2. Timestamps logged. New Year 2. DNR notification. Year 3. Erosion project. 14 months between mother's visits. It looks like the timber cruise I arranged in year 4, a professional assessment of the standing timber volume and species composition, conducted by a licensed forester named Russ Kavanaugh out of Sequim, who walked every acre with me over 2 days and produced a 12-page cruise report with volume estimates by species, age class, and slope unit. Russ's fee was $3,200. My mother said she didn't see why we needed it right now. I said that any timber management plan would require it, that the data would only get more expensive to obtain later, and that I would pay for it myself and be reimbursed if and when the land generated revenue. She said that was very generous of me. Russ's cruise report went into a second binder, same dark green cover, same clear front pocket. I labeled the spine. Halcyon Ridge Parcel, Timber Cruise, R. Kavanaugh CF, Clallam Ty WA. I kept that one in my home office too. I did not bring a copy to my mother's kitchen table. The DNR permitting process was the longest single task I had done for the parcel, and I did it alone. My mother had left for Arizona in the second week of January. She spent 6 weeks every winter at my Aunt Philippa's snowbird rental in Scottsdale, a pattern she had established after my father died and which the family had organized itself around without discussion. She left on a Thursday. The DNR permit application deadline for the spring management window was February 28th. I had been gathering the application materials since October. The permit was for a limited timber stand improvement project, thinning the overcrowded vine maple in the understory to improve canopy conditions for the fir, which Russ's cruise report had flagged as suppressed in the southwest units. The application required the cruise report, the soil survey, the riparian buffer analysis from Dr. Lindstrom's report, a management plan narrative, a scaled map with the treatment units delineated, and signatures from the landowner. My mother had signed a limited power of attorney for land management decisions the previous spring, at my suggestion, before she left for Arizona the year before. I had drafted the document from a template, had it reviewed by a notary in Port Angeles, and brought it to her kitchen table for signing on a Sunday morning in March. She had signed it without reading it carefully. She held the pen the way she held things she trusted me to have already understood, and said it was good to have things organized. I used the POA to submit the DNR application on February 22nd, 6 days before the deadline. The application was 47 pages, including attachments. I had assembled it over 14 evenings at my kitchen table in Port Angeles, working from 7 to 10 or 11, with the cruise report and the soil binder open beside my laptop, and the management plan narrative going through 4 drafts before I was satisfied with it. The DNR approved the application on April 3rd. I called my mother in Scottsdale to tell her. "Oh, wonderful," she said. "You're so good at all of this." I said thank you. I let it sit. Family. The boundary dispute had been building since year 1, when I first noticed that the fence line on the east boundary did not match the legal description in the deed. The legal description said the east boundary ran along the ridgeline to a concrete monument set in 1961 by a survey crew my grandfather had hired, then south along the slope to a second monument at the lower corner. The fence line, in 2 places along the middle section, ran 15 to 20 feet west of where the legal description put the boundary. The difference was not enormous in acreage terms. I estimated maybe 2.5 acres, but it included a stand of mature fir in the northeast corner that Russ's cruise report had identified as the highest value timber on the parcel. The property east of ours was owned by a family named Ostrander, 4th generation Clallam County, cattle operation, a son named Phil who ran it now, and had the particular manner of someone who has always been certain where their land ends and other people's begins. I had met Phil Ostrander twice at the gate in year 2, both times when I was coming out from the parcel, and he was checking his own fence line on the road. We had been cordial. He had not mentioned the boundary. I had not mentioned it either because I wanted to understand exactly what I was looking at before I said anything to anyone. In year 4, I commissioned a boundary survey. The surveyor was a licensed land surveyor named Carolyn Tice, out of Port Angeles, who came recommended by the Clallam County Assessor's Office. Her fee was $4,800 for a full boundary survey with monument recovery. I paid the deposit of $2,400 from my own account and told my mother the survey was being done as part of the timber management planning. "Whatever you think is best," my mother said. Carolyn Tice spent 3 days on the parcel in September, working with a 2-person crew. She found both original 1961 monuments, concrete, still solid, undisturbed, and established that the east fence line had drifted west of the true boundary at some point in the previous 30 years, possibly during a fence replacement the Ostranders had done in the 1990s. The encroachment on the 2 middle sections measured 17 feet at its widest point. She gave me her field notes before the final report was complete. I read them in my truck at the gate. I called my mother that evening. "The east boundary is not where the fence is," I said. "We're missing about 2.5 acres. There was a pause. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to have a conversation with the Ostranders," I said. "Or their attorney." "Oh, I don't want any trouble with the Ostranders," my mother said. "It's not trouble," I said. "It's a boundary correction. Carolyn's report will document the monument locations. It's straightforward." "Well," she said, "you handle it." I handled it. I sent Carolyn's final report, which came in November, after the field work was complete and the monuments reset, to an attorney in Port Angeles named David Yee, who handled property matters. David wrote a letter to the Ostrander's attorney laying out the survey findings and requesting a fence relocation. The Ostrander's attorney responded. There were 3 letters in total. By February of year 5, Phil Ostrander had relocated the fence to the correct boundary line, and Clallam County had the corrected plat on file. The 2.5 acres came back to the parcel. The northeast fir stand, per Russ's Timber Crew's values, represented approximately $38,600 in standing timber at current market rates. My mother said it was a good outcome. She said it at Easter dinner at Philippa's, to Garrett, as though she were reporting on something that had been handled on her behalf by the county itself, which, in a way, she believed it had. I passed the breadbasket to Garrett's wife, and I let it sit. Family. The postcard came in October. It was a standard county assessor's notification, a small card, the kind printed on pale yellow stock, the kind that arrives in a stack of mail between a grocery circular and an electric bill, and almost gets set aside without reading. It was addressed to my mother's house in Sequim, but forwarded to my Port Angeles address, because 2 years earlier I had filed a forwarding request for parcel-related correspondence with the county, a thing I had done quietly because documents kept arriving at my mother's house on days she was traveling and sitting in a pile on her kitchen counter until I happened to come by. The postcard said, "A deed transfer document has been recorded for Clallam County tax parcel number. See Assessor's Office for details." I read it standing at my mailbox. Deed transfer. The parcel had not been sold. I would have known. The only other deed event that generated an assessor's notification was a new filing. Someone had filed a deed on the parcel. I drove to the county assessor's office in Port Angeles the next morning. It opened at 8. I was there at 7:55 in the parking lot, with the soil survey binder on the passenger seat and the timber cruise binder behind it, and the boundary survey report in the accordion folder I kept in the truck for parcel documents. The assessor's clerk pulled up the parcel record. The new deed had been filed 3 weeks prior. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring the parcel from my mother's name as sole owner to my mother's name and my brother Clement's name as joint tenants. My brother Clement lived in Spokane. He had been to the Clallam County parcel twice in his life. Once as a teenager when our grandfather was still alive, once 4 years ago when he drove through Port Angeles on a road trip and stopped for lunch, and we drove out to the gate, so he could see it. He had looked through the fence for about 5 minutes and said it was beautiful country and asked if there was a bathroom nearby. His name was now on the deed. Mine was not. The notary stamp on the quitclaim deed was dated a Tuesday. I had been at the parcel that Tuesday, finishing the soil transect recheck Dr. Lindstrom had asked for as a follow-up to her original assessment. Nobody had called me. I stood at the assessor's counter and looked at the screen for a moment. The clerk waited. Outside, through the window, the Port Angeles harbor was flat and gray in the October light, the mountains across the strait dusted with early snow. "I'd like to file a deed," I said. She looked at me. "What kind?" she said. "A quitclaim," I said. "Same parcel. I want to add my name as a co-owner of record." She explained the process. She gave me the form. I sat at the small table they kept against the wall for exactly this kind of thing, with the accordion folder open beside me, and I filled out the deed form in the careful block printing I had learned to use for official documents. I listed the parcel number. I listed the legal description from the 1961 original deed, which I had memorized over 5 years of working with it. I listed my mother's name as grantor and my name as grantee, joint tenant. I signed it. I had it notarized at the notary window 3 steps from the clerk's desk. I paid the $47 recording fee. The clerk stamped it, assigned it a document number, and told me it would be processed within 3 business days. I put the receipt in the accordion folder. Then I called my mother from the parking lot. She answered on the 3rd ring. "I'm at the assessor's office," I said. A pause. "Oh." "I saw the notification about the deed," I said. "The quitclaim with Clement." Another pause, a different one, with more information in it. "I was going to tell you," she said. "I've been meaning to talk to you about the long-term plan for the property. Clement is family." It made sense to get him involved. "Clement has been to the parcel twice," I said. "He's family," she said again. "I filed my own deed this morning," I said. The silence that followed was about 4 seconds long. I counted them by watching a seagull land on the parking lot median and walk 3 steps and stop. "You can't just, that's not how it works," she said. "I checked with the clerk," I said. "It is how it works. I'm a co-owner of record, as of this morning." "Dessa." Her voice had taken on the patient tone, the one that was really a wall dressed as a courtesy. "The property is mine. My father left it to me. You've been helping me manage it, and I appreciate that enormously, but the ownership is mine to determine. I've spent 5 years managing this parcel," I said. "I've paid for surveys, assessments, permits. I've filed DNR applications, resolved a boundary encroachment, run a conservation district cost share project. I have documentation for all of it. That was you volunteered for that, she said. I never asked you to spend your own money. You said, whatever you think is best, I said. She did not say anything. I have the soil survey binder, I said. The timber cruise. The boundary survey. The DNR permit file. I brought everything. Dessa, she said. I think we should talk about this in person, not like this. All right, I said. I let it sit. Family. I got back in my truck. The Seagull was gone from the median. The harbor was still gray, the mountains still snow-dusted, the morning exactly as ordinary as it had been before I walked into that office. I sat for a moment with the accordion folder on the passenger seat and the soil survey binder behind it and looked at the building I had just come out of. Then I drove back to Port Angeles and went to work. The in-person conversation happened 4 days later at my mother's house in Sequim. She had suggested it by text, come for lunch Sunday, we can talk, and I had said yes and driven over on a gray November Sunday with the accordion folder on the passenger seat and the soil survey binder and the timber cruise binder behind it. I did not bring everything in when I arrived. I left the binders in the truck. I brought only the accordion folder, which I set on the floor beside my chair in her kitchen without opening it. She had made soup. This was deliberate. Soup is a thing you make when you want a conversation to feel domestic and manageable, when you want the warmth of the kitchen to do some of the work. She ladled it into the bowls she had used since I was a child, the ones with the blue rim, and set a plate of bread in the center of the table, and we sat down. I know you're upset, she said. I looked at the soup. It was lentil. She made it every fall, the same recipe her mother had used, the smell of cumin and bay leaf that belonged to November the way the mud road belonged to November. I'm not upset, I said. I want to understand the plan. The plan is for the land to stay in the family, she said. That's always been the plan. Clement doesn't know what's on that parcel, I said. He's never read a document about it. He doesn't know where the riparian buffer runs. He doesn't need to know that right now, she said. He's family. That's what matters. I'm family, I said. She looked at her soup. She picked up her spoon and set it back down. I know that, Dessa. But you've made this your whole project. You've put all this energy into it and I appreciate that, I do, but the land isn't yours to run. It's mine. My father left it to me. Adding Clement was about the future. About making sure it stays in the family after I'm gone. After you're gone, I said. And my name isn't on it. You have your own life, she said. You have your career. You have the work you do. The land is a separate thing. Signal 4, sensory details. New lentil soup / cumin and bay leaf / blue rim bowls / bread plate center of table. I thought about the Tuesday they had the notary come. I had been at the parcel that day. I had driven out in the morning to do the soil transect recheck Dr. Lindstrom had requested, walking the west units with the datasheet and the probe, the kind of work that takes most of a day and produces nothing visible, nothing you can point to, only numbers on a form that get compared to numbers on an earlier form to confirm that the soil conditions are holding. I had driven home in the late afternoon with mud on my boots and the completed datasheet in the accordion folder. While I was doing that, a notary had driven to my mother's house in Sequim, and my mother had signed a quitclaim deed adding my brother's name to the property I had spent 5 years managing. Nobody had called me. Not before and not after. The postcard from the assessor's office was how I found out, 3 weeks later, the way you find out about things that were not meant to be found out from you directly. You volunteered for all of this, my mother said. She had picked up her spoon again. She was holding it but not using it. I never asked you to spend your own money. I never asked you to put in all those weekends. You did that because you wanted to. You said, whatever you think is best, I said. Every time. For 5 years. Because I trusted you, she said. That's not the same as, it doesn't mean the land is yours. I looked at the bread plate. I looked at the blue rim bowls. I looked at the window above the sink, which faced east toward the Olympics, which were invisible that morning behind cloud cover, which were 43 acres of second-growth fir and basalt outcrop, and a seasonal creek, and a boundary line that was now correctly fenced because I had spent $4,800 and 2 months of correspondence with an attorney to make it so. I know it doesn't mean the land is mine, I said. I'm not saying it's mine. I'm saying my name should be on it. She set the spoon down. I need to think about this, she said. All right, I said. I let it sit. Family. We finished the soup. She talked about Philippa's holiday plans, and I listened and said the right things, and helped clear the bowls. I drove back to Port Angeles with the accordion folder on the passenger seat, unopened, the binders behind me on the back seat, and the Olympic peaks still invisible behind cloud all the way down the highway. I need to tell you about a conversation I had with my grandfather when I was 11 years old. He was still alive then, barely, in the way of men in their late 80s who have been strong their whole lives and find the diminishment surprising. He was living with us that winter in the room at the end of the hall, and on a Saturday morning in January he called me in and asked me to sit down, and told me he wanted to show me something. He had a deed. It was his original deed to the Clallam County parcel, the 1961 document, typed on paper that had gone the color of old cream, folded into quarters along creases so sharp they had begun to separate at the intersections. He unfolded it on the blanket across his lap and smoothed it with both hands, the way you smooth something you have handled until the handling is part of what you know about it. 43 acres, he said. I paid $8,400 for it in 1961. People thought I was crazy. He looked at me. Do you know what it's worth now? I said I didn't. Doesn't matter, he said. That's not why I bought it. He told me he had bought it because he believed that land was the thing that stayed when everything else moved. Jobs moved. Houses needed repairs that cost more than you had. Money came and went. But land, properly tended, held. The key word, he said, is tended. Land doesn't hold on its own. You have to know what's on it. You have to know where the water runs and where the rock is and what the soil will grow and where the lines are. Otherwise, you don't own it. You just have a piece of paper. He refolded the deed along the old creases. He handed it to me for a moment. I held it, the weight of it, the cream-colored paper, and then he took it back and put it in the wooden box on the nightstand. Your mother doesn't want to know that stuff, he said. It was not unkind. It was just the way you say a true thing about someone you love. But somebody should. I had been that somebody for 5 years. I was still being that somebody on the Tuesday the notary came to Sequim while I was walking a soil transect on the west slope with mud on my boots, while nobody called. 3 weeks after the Sunday soup lunch, my mother called. She called on a Wednesday evening, which was not her usual pattern. She called on Sunday mornings, typically the way she had always called on Sunday mornings, a habit from when I was in college that had never been updated. A Wednesday evening call meant something had shifted. I talked to Clement, she said. I waited. He doesn't want to be on the deed, she said. He said he doesn't know anything about land and he doesn't want the responsibility. A pause. He said it should be you. I held the phone. I've been thinking about what you said, she said. About the surveys. About the permits. I looked at the binder, the soil one. I looked at it properly this time. Another pause. I didn't know it was 41 pages. 41 pages plus the appendices, I said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. I think we need to redo the deed, she said. I think it should be the two of us. All right, I said. I should have talked to you first, she said. Before the notary. I should have talked to you. I did not say, yes, you should have. I did not say, 3 weeks and a Tuesday and a postcard on pale yellow stock and a seagull on a parking lot median. I did not say any of the things that were available to say. We can call David Yee, I said. He handled the boundary matter. He can draft the new deed. Yes, she said. That would be good. The following Saturday morning I drove to Port Angeles early. I stopped at the hardware store and bought 2 new padlocks for the gate. The combination had been the same for 6 years, and it was time to change it. I drove the gravel road out to the parcel. The road was dry. We were in a dry spell, unusual for November, the kind that makes the mud ruts harden into ridges that rattle the truck's suspension on the way in. I unlocked the gate with the old combination for the last time, drove through, and relocked it behind me with one of the new padlocks. I left the old one on the passenger seat. I walked the skid road in. I walked all the way to the upper landing, the half-mile, the overgrown but traceable path, the fern and oxalis giving way to the denser understory of the southwest units, then opening again at the top where the old landing gave a view east across the ridge. I stood there for a while. The mountains across the strait were visible that morning, the cloud cover gone, the snow line lower than it had been in October. I took the orange field notebook out of my jacket pocket. I turned to the next blank page. I wrote the date. I wrote, Boundaries survey complete, fence corrected. DNR permit approved. Soil assessment on file. Timber crews on file. Deed correction pending. David Yee's office. I wrote the combination for the new padlock. I closed the notebook. I stood at the upper landing for another minute with the notebook in my hand and the view east and the smell of second-growth fir and the particular quiet of 43 acres that have been properly tended. Then I walked back down. At David Yee's office the following Tuesday, my mother and I sat in the 2 chairs across from his desk and David produced the draft deed, joint tenancy, both names, equal interest, and went through it clause by clause in the careful way he had. My mother had her reading glasses on this time, actually on her face. She read each page before she signed. I reached into the accordion folder I had set on the floor beside my chair. I took out the soil survey binder. I took out the timber crews binder. I laid them flat on David's desk, one after the other, green covers face up. Then I reached back in and took out the boundary survey report, spiral-bound, Carolyn Tice's name on the cover, and laid it above the 2 binders, centered. For the file, I said to David. He looked at the stack. He picked up the soil binder and opened it to the spine label and set it back down. These should be part of the property record, he said. I'll note them in the deed documentation. My mother looked at the binders. She looked at them the way she had looked at the single soil binder on her kitchen table 2 years ago. That's thorough. But this time the 3 of them together had a different weight, a different presence, and she looked at them longer. Your father would have kept records like this, she said. She was not talking to me. She was looking at the binders and talking to the room, or to herself, or to whoever she needed to tell.
He did, I said.
He kept the original deed in a wooden box. She looked at me. I know, she said. David set his pen down. He looked at both of us with the mild patience of someone who has been watching families sort themselves out across a desk for a long time. Shall we proceed? He said. We proceeded. My mother signed first. I signed second. David had the documents notarized and told us the recording would be filed with the county by end of week. I put the accordion folder back over my shoulder. My mother picked up her reading glasses from the desk and put them in her coat pocket. We walked out through David's reception area and out the front door and onto the Port Angeles Street. Outside, the harbor was visible 2 blocks down, flat and gray-green. The mountains across the strait lit up in the late afternoon. My mother looked at them for a moment. You should have the combination to the new padlock, I said. What happened to the old one? I changed it last Saturday, I said. It was time. She nodded. I took the slip of paper with the new combination from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. She folded it and put it in her coat pocket with the glasses. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment without speaking. The harbor light was the particular low-angled gold of November in Port Angeles, the kind that makes everything look documented, preserved, specific. I'll call you about Christmas, she said. All right, I said. She walked to her car. I walked to my truck. I put the accordion folder on the passenger seat and the 2 binders behind me and drove back toward the highway. Here is what I want you to take from this. The soil survey binder has 41 pages plus appendices. The timber crews binder has 12 pages and 2 maps. The boundary survey report has 23 pages and a plat drawing that shows both 1961 monuments, recovered and intact, exactly where my grandfather said they would be. I did not make those documents to win an argument. I made them because I have the kind of mind that needs the work to exist somewhere outside of memory, somewhere you can pick up and hand to a person and say, this is what was done here. My grandfather had that mind too. He kept the deed in a wooden box on his nightstand, and he knew it said 43 acres, and he knew where the water ran and where the rock was and what the soil would grow. He knew the land because he had tended it, and tending it meant knowing it, and knowing it meant writing things down. The deed has both our names on it now. It was recorded with Clallam County by the end of that week, filed in the same system that holds the 1961 original, the boundary survey, the DNR permit, the soil assessment. All of it in the same record. All of it legible to anyone who looks. My grandfather said land doesn't hold on its own. You have to know what's on it, Where the lines are, where the water runs, what it will grow. Otherwise, you don't own it. You just have a piece of paper. The piece of paper matters. But so does the knowing. 5 years of Saturdays and mud and soil transects and county correspondence and padlock combinations, that is also a kind of record, and it lives in a place no assessor's office can file, and no notary can stamp, which is the land itself, in the things that have been corrected and managed and tended, and will keep being so. If this story found you at a moment when you needed it, share it with someone who needed it too. It costs you nothing, and it means more than you know. I'm Hostname, and I'll see you in the next one.